I'm a developer, they're not spelling things out. And in general, it just really sounds like somebody's talking directly to you. One of the things I often hear when I talk to companies about being more colloquial is, oh no, that's not our voice. That's not really our brand. Colloquial is too playful for us. But what they're misunderstanding is colloquial is not about that. It's really just about having a conversation. There's nothing unprofessional about the tone here. It's just a nice colloquial conversational tone. So let's contrast that with a really famously bad example, iTunes agreement. Nobody knows how to read this. Nobody has ever really gotten through this. There's a lot that's going on here that's not working, but one of the things I want to focus on is the all caps. Everyone in this room has probably seen a legal agreement in all caps before. Why do they do that? I'll talk about that in a little bit, but first off, all caps are really hard to read. And second, if this is a conversation, doesn't it look like they're screaming at us? So why are they yelling? Because someone told them they have to. It's not because they wanted to, I'm sure. No lawyers out there really angry with their customers, but someone told them they had to. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So what goes wrong? We can all agree that clear colloquial content is better for our users. We have tons of great web writers nowadays that know how to create this. But getting that content through the review process is not as easy as it seems. So this is how we typically imagine the content process working. There's some brilliant content creator who creates this perfect piece of content. They toss it over to their maybe 2 or 3 reviewers who are like, perfect, maybe you missed a comma here, but don't worry about it. They toss that down to the dev team who's like, okay, perfect, fits our patterns, this is great, it'll take us a day, we'll stick it in, and then the user's like, hooray, you gave me everything I wanted, thank you. I don't think that sounds too familiar. So how it really works. Content creator tosses over content to their 40,000 reviewers, and this is in my experience, this is not everyone's, but particularly at a large organization like Amex. There's marketing, there's brand, strategy, product, there's that one guy who loves the word synergies. Everyone has to have a say in this content. So they take a look, 3 weeks later, the content creator hasn't heard anything back, so they're nagging. Finally, they get back 10 or 17 different files. Everything is completely conflicting. Synergies guys, there's no synergies between this and the marketing content. Marketing's this isn't our brand, the voice is all wrong. Legal's here's 17 more disclosures you need to fit into this tiny little experience. So back to the content creator who's okay, how's this? And the reviewers are okay, we fixed it for you. Maybe that goes back in 3 or 4 different rounds. But finally, they come up with something that doesn't really look like how they started, but we'll move on. So down to the dev team, who throws their hands in the air, and they're like, should have talked to us. This is not possible. Everything you just created doesn't fit our system. We're going to have to re-architect half the platform if you actually want us to get this live. So back to the weary content creator, who bends over backwards, last-minute deadlines, try to fix things, tosses it back. Dev team's like, okay, we'll make this work. And our user's like, what the hell? It doesn't make sense. It's somehow redundant and missing key info at the same time. It sounds like it was written by 10 different people, because it probably was. And it doesn't represent anything that went into the initial content. So let's talk about how to make it better. I'm going to talk about 3 different periods, but at first, I think it's really important that you start by working with your reviewers from the planning mode of your projects. So this is an obvious one, but I see this overlooked all the time. At the very beginning of your project, take some time to list out everyone that's going to need to approve your project. So if this is maybe a couple stakeholders, work with those stakeholders to make sure that there's nobody that they need to have. A couple times I've had this example where, we're just to the finish line and we're right about to deliver something, and all of a sudden I hear, oh, well, we just need to run this by our really opinionated VP first. And you're like, it was so close. So make a list, check it twice. I think the big thing to keep in mind is that we have different kinds of reviewers that have different things they care about, and we need to work with them in a little bit different ways. There's, of course, a ton of different types of reviewers, but I think of them in 3 kind of overall groups. First, there are the people who care most about what you say and how you say it. So this is what is the actual content you're saying? What's the voice you're using? These are people usually in marketing, editorial, strategy, product, brand, things like that. They're the folks that care most about protecting your company from things like fraud, litigation. These are often our lawyer friends, compliance, risk, fraud. And then there are the folks that really care most about the experience design and build. So if we're lucky, we work on a team directly with them, and these are our fellow designers and developers, fellow IAs. So I know everyone's schedule's hectic, but at the very beginning of your project, take time to meet with all of these people. It's really important that you kick off the project with their concerns in mind. In these meetings, it's really important to share your project goals and timelines, how you're going to work with them, and that's not just to review content, but actually how to create it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. What type of feedback you need. This is a really big thing, and I've had a lot of success with this. Just as we don't look to our copy editors to provide us legal feedback, we don't need our lawyers to be line editing our copy. It's really, really helpful if you can gently position this as, we want to save you time and energy. We've got our bases covered with all of these different reviewers. Just please focus on this, and you can pass along your approval for this thing alone. Uh-oh. Sure. Okay, and we're back. And also, of course, it's really important to talk about any major changes. So if something you're proposing is actually going to radically change the experience that they're familiar with, air these out right now so you can talk about that with them. These pre-flight meetings are also really important to ask questions, learn about their timelines and review needs. Some people might have really long timelines for turning around content reviews. They might even have like a formalized process that they require you to use. And also talk to them about what you should keep in mind. So for example, if you're redesigning an experience that is heavily regulated by the government in an industry that's, like financial services at Amex, you might have some things that you really absolutely must do that your reviewers have no control over. Are there technical limits on the channel? Are there any things that you should use as well? You need at least 2 rounds of reviews for your content. I would say 3 or 4, expect. When you're making your timeline, think about how long it really truly takes to create excellent content. Think about how long it's going to take your reviewers to review that. Think about how long it's going to take you to edit and then send it back a second time. And then like double or triple that time we'll expect. And it's the number one that goes out timelines in the end. All right, so now that you've set things up properly with everyone, you're into the meat of the project, you're doing your discovery and your design phase. It's really important that you don't work in a vacuum. I think you should avoid this by working on your content with all of your different reviewer groups, but in the different ways that suit each reviewer type. So let's start with the people who care most about what you say and how you say it. So these people are those folks in strategy, marketing, brand, etc. Before you do anything else, check to see if you guys are all in agreement about the variance over things like, oh no, that's not really our brand. We don't say things like that. Or we have a particular way we have to say this line. If you don't have guidelines, it's a really good time to think about spinning off a project to create some, because this is going to come up again and again and again. Once you know what you're saying or how you're going to say it, I really recommend running a series of workshops to build a messaging matrix together. This is going to be the best thing you have to go back to in your reviews over time. I usually start a messaging matrix workshop with a brainstorming session. So we'll get everyone who cares about what that content is in a room, including my developers and my designers that I'm working with. And we brainstorm every potential message that needs to come up throughout this experience. From there, I'll take that away and I'll group them into similar groups, and I'll create an empty, probably Excel spreadsheet. It's not pretty, it doesn't need to be fancy, with all of those messages across the top. So let's take a look at what that might look like. You've got all your messages across the top, and you've got all of the different places it could appear in your experience down the side. Hold a second messaging workshop with all of those same folks, and put tick marks in all of the boxes where a message should take place. Get everyone to agree on it. And then, before you leave, prioritize it. Because one of the biggest things I've run into is folks who think we can have 7 different prioritized pieces of content in a single email. Can't do it. And it's really good to have your designers and developers in the room with you to help make sure that people really understand why that's not possible. So once you settle on this matrix, you know exactly what's prioritized and where. Print it out and bring this to all of your reviews, because then people aren't going to come in last minute and say, oh, I was really expecting us to cover this here. everyone helped contribute to what we need to cover here. You've got some really good divergent views in the room to get you there. And now you have an artifact that's going to hold you to it. The next step is to create and share page tables. If you're not familiar with page tables, they're a really good tool, not only for your reviewers, but also for you as a content creator to help you get over that blank page syndrome. So a page table can look like this. It's also not very fancy. It's going to, at minimum, cover things like what part of the experience is this, what's potentially like a page title for that, what is the overall message we want to convey here, and then what are the different prioritized content pieces here. So we're moving from that messaging matrix into our content, and this is going to be a deliverable we get approval on from all of these same folks, and we're going to use this to make sure that when we're actually creating our content, we're keeping ourselves honest. We agreed with everyone that this is what this experience needs to do. This is going to help our designers and developers as well. All right, so let's move on to co-creating with people who are focused on protecting the company. Unlike that last group, these folks are typically a little bit less interested in actually creating the content with you because schedules are busy. There's typically not so much content that concerns them that they need to create it with you. So I find that if we have an experience that is particularly in their wheelhouse, maybe we're redesigning a form that's heavily regulated, maybe we are looking at just simply rewriting some terms and conditions, it's best to take a stab at it and then hold a workshop with these folks to review it. Inevitably in this workshop, you're going to come across a lot of pushback. These folks, you know, bless their heart, typically don't come from user experience backgrounds, and you guys might be coming at things from divergent points of view. When you wax and wane to them about the importance of user experience, a lot of times I'll find, although this was not necessarily the case at Amex, but I've found in the past that lawyers don't really care. They're like, well, that's great. You know, of course we want the user to have a good user experience, but ultimately we need to protect the company. So do your homework. Start thinking about, if that's what they're concerned about, how can we find out what issues might arise out of protecting our company and not helping our users at the same time. So here's a good example I like to point to. The many times that Apple has been sued for having terrible terms and conditions. A lot of times, people in other countries particularly have found issue with, I think they're Apple's EULA in particular, which is impenetrable. It's a good reminder for our legal partners that just because they think we're in this ironclad situation full of legalese, we're not necessarily safe. So back to our old friend, the disclaimer. They're yelling at us in all caps. So why are they yelling specifically in all caps? It's because in something called the US Uniform Commercial Code, which a lot of lawyers use to create some of these documents, they have something called terms being conspicuous. So certain terms must be conspicuous if they're exceptionally important. So bear with me, I want to walk through what that means. So the Uniform Commercial Code defines conspicuous as meaning so written, displayed, or presented that a reasonable person ought to have noticed it. Conspicuous terms include the following. A headline in capitals equal to or greater in size than the surrounding text, or in contrasting type, font, or color to the surrounding text of the same size or lesser size. And B, language in the body in larger type than the surrounding text, or in contrasting type, font, or color to the surrounding text of the same size, or set off from surrounding text of the same size by symbols or other marks that call attention to our language. So this is, in the bold text, what our lawyers are seeing. I read this, and this is what I see. We have a lot of options here. And it's really good to look back to our friends at plainlanguage.gov who say, it's very difficult to read sentences in all capital letters because it's unnatural and the normal visual cues are missing. A short header is readable in all caps, but anything more strains the reader. Consider these other methods of highlighting important information: boxing the information, changing type size or font, using italics, or a light screen. But hey, those are all options within the Uniform Commercial Code. By doing my homework, I've found that there's a more creative answer that is completely compliant and is actually far more user-friendly. So again, the main point there is do your homework. Really look at what they care about and appeal to their concerns. You're going to have a lot more luck getting to the same thing that you guys both want together. And lastly, it's really important to co-create with people focused on your experience's design and build, so your fellow IAs, UX and visual designers, and developers. This is a no-brainer. lucky enough that my team was structured in a way that we were really all put on projects together and expected to collaborate from the beginning. Nobody worked in a vacuum. I know in a lot of situations people are forced to work in a vacuum. I highly recommend getting your team together, checking in daily with everyone, whether that's over the phone, more importantly in person if possible, having your designers and developers attend your reviews, attend your content workshops, be that voice of reason, be that expertise that you really need them to be. A great way you can help these folks is working with real content as soon as possible. So we all know, hopefully by now, that lorem ipsum should never exist in our experience. It's a terrible way to design because basically you're going to be designing for nothing. A big part of this is thinking about content as sketches. You can, from a page table, start writing something. I don't care if nothing that you write at that moment actually ends up in the real experience. But if you're creating something that your designers and developers can work with, it really is indicative of where you're going. It's got a little bit of the voice and tone in it. It talks about the actual content, the actual information you want to convey. It's going to go a much longer way in helping your developers. So just a reminder, no lorem ipsum, no a big title or intro copy headline. This doesn't mean anything. And work with real content from the very beginning. All right, so you've created with all of your reviewers in mind. Now it's time to actually review your content. What do? It's really important to create consistent review processes and tools. So by tools, I'm talking about the ways you deliver content. There are really two that I use right now, and I've found success with at American Express. In particular, delivering your content in situ with the designs, whether we're talking about a prototype, a design comp, but actually having your content pulled in there, or a copy deck. And that can be something like maybe a Word doc, better yet, a Google Doc. The pros and cons to reviewing in design, it best mimics the overall experience, so folks have a really easy understanding of how that content's going to work. It's not easy to comment on, which is great if you don't want comments. So maybe you're just trying to get the design review, you're trying to get the overall feel of some high-level content. You don't want anyone copy editing. It also takes more time to update, which is a con. You know, if you have your designers and developers working on more important things, you don't want to be asking them to constantly update the button copy. And it's not easy to comment on, which is a bad thing if you do want that low-level feedback. In general, I would recommend reviewing your content design if you want high-level feedback, if you want to support your copy deck, or if you simply just don't want that low-level feedback in the moment. And for a copy deck, it's really great for track changes. This is a really important thing. When I see copy delivered in stuff like Excel or PowerPoint, I go crazy because your reviewers can't provide feedback that's going to be easy for you to interpret. You're going to get 16 different documents back. You're not going to know how to do anything with that. With both Google Docs and Word, there are great ways to combine all those comments in one place, and you can see how different people conflict and help them see that and work through some solutions together. It's of course easier to maintain than a prototype or a Word doc or a design file. But unfortunately, it's really out of context. So if you're delivering a really content-heavy experience without any sense of design, people aren't going to know what you're talking about, and it's going to create a lot of confusion. So I recommend using these things hand in hand if you can. Lastly, have a consistent review process. So there's a lot of things to think about here. Hold some in-flight reviews. Don't work in a vacuum, as I said. As soon as you start getting some content, throw it over to them. Get some early feedback, high-level feedback, and then you can definitely incorporate that. Schedule your final reviews with a lot of things in mind. Of course, if it's content-heavy, give them some time to look at it beforehand. Make sure that they come to your final review with with comments in mind. Hold your meetings in person if you can. This is something that was really successful for us at Amex, is to get everyone together, whether in a room or on the phone. If you do it on the phone, make sure you have screen sharing software so you can pull things up and everyone can be on the same page. And don't do anything longer than an hour and a half. It gets really, really dry for folks. Bring cake if you can. Hold multiple reviews if you have to. When you start your final review, remind your reviewers the kind of feedback you need. That's everything from high level from you. And during the review one thing at a time. Don't overload people. Try and find solutions live together. This is good for when you get something that seems kind of impossible feedback. It can help people understand your thinking process and where you came from if you actually kind of put the feet to the fire and ask people to start thinking about things together. Treat your reviewers like the experts they are. You don't want to be online for getting your company sued. So make sure that you let them tell you the expertise that they have. And if you're hesitant to that, they're going to start thinking of you as a cocky jerk, and nothing's ever going to get done. And know where and how to push back, but you can also be firm and flexible. So you are the usability expertise, and come prepared with your stats, your user research, some of your favorite quotes that are going to help support that. I found that goes a really long way in reviews. All right, wrapping up in general, if you can't meet your deadline, don't expect your reviewers to meet theirs. They're not going to be the ones that are going to make up time for you. And cultivate positive relationships with them. Be friends on the side, get to know them, help them understand your expertise better. Just respect in general will always help a review go. And if nothing else, like I said, just to summarize, work with your reviewers to both plan and create content, consider your different types of reviewers, and be really thoughtful and consistent in how you share work. I want to close with this really lovely quote from Nicole Fenton and Kate Kiefer-Lee from their book Nicely Said. Keep in mind that feedback is a gift and not an insult. Thank you.